All right, we are either going to be served some humble pie or we're going to be calling some BS in this one.
Yes.
Here's why driving in Europe is better than America, an American's perspective. Any predictions before we go in?
I bet this American, all right, sucks at driving.
Wow, that's a bold claim, and you
I
haven't
just,
even seen them drive.
it's always just these kind of videos from an American perspective. American in question. Let's see.
It's usually a Californian or a New Yorker or I don't know.
Well, and both of those places have like worse traffic out there. So
yeah.
Let's see their perspective. Let's go.
Yeah, reference before we get in. We both live in very country areas, and drivers are a lot better than in the cities. We can tell you that right now.
Driving is enjoyable as hell.
It is,
especially when you can go off road.
Oh yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm.
So
let's see.
Let's go.
3, 2, 1. Oh, would help if I. There we go. American expats. Okay.
I love driving, and I especially love driving in Europe. I've been living in Europe for about 2 years now, originally from Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
I've lived.
Okay, Florida, Orlando. I guess we could qualify his response here.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. I'll go with him.
Lived in Amsterdam for about 2 years now.
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam isn't exactly a car place, but I've always been a car person, and I've always loved driving. What I like about living in Europe is that European drivers are excellent, especially compared to American drivers. I was inspired for this video after watching a video by Tedward, which I'll link in the description below. In his video, he was explaining why Americans don't use a 3-lane highway correctly, and it got me thinking how much I appreciate driving in Europe. European drivers are some of the best I've seen, and I think some of the best in the world, and I'm hoping to explain why I believe so in this video. Now, I haven't done any research. This is just my experience, so if I'm wrong about anything, please correct me in the comments. This is just my perspective, having lived in Europe for 2 years, having driven mostly around Western European countries, such as Netherlands, Switzerland, France, Germany, UK, and in the US, I primarily have driven in Florida. So Florida's not exactly known for the best drivers, especially we get a lot of tourists who don't know how to drive in the US, and a lot of elderly folks, and just people who don't know the right rules of the road. So that's my benchmark. That's what I'm comparing against. One of the main...
Yeah, the tourists and the elderly, and they don't give many cities that good of a look.
No, they don't. It's unfortunate, because cities attract tourists, and tourists just, I don't know, maybe bring their bad habits over.
Yeah, and also we're very self-centered as a country, and the thing that is required for a lot of safe driving is empathy. Just not realizing that you're sharing the road with a bunch of other people and you're all driving a weapon.
Yeah, and defensive driving. Just defensive driving.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I think I will have to eat some humble pie, because I'll say this. The licenses across the pond are insanely expensive to get. And only those of you that are serious about driving and need to drive take that shit seriously. Here, 16, and that's all you got to be.
Yeah. Answer a few questions, drive okay, and bada boom, bada bang, you've got a driver's license.
And it's not that expensive at all. I don't remember it being, I would say, with the driving classes and all that stuff, I don't expect it more than $200.
Yeah.
Anything more than that.
Right. And it's definitely not more than 200.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Main reasons I think European drivers are better is just driving in general is a privilege. So if you look at most European places, most European cities, you don't need a car. You don't need to drive anywhere. public transportation is well established. You can use a train, a metro, a tram to get pretty much anywhere you need to go. You can use public transportation to get pretty much anywhere, so you don't really need to drive. Only if you live in more suburban parts of Europe, but even then public transportation is still available.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, because pretty much throughout the United States, you have to drive.
Yeah.
It's just, that is the standard, is driving. Our public transit system, well, in our rural counties, it's non-existent. There is no public transit. It's the bigger major cities that have public transit, but it's just the major ones. And even like Amtrak, like that only connects major cities. And the buses, like coaches, like Greyhound or Flixbus, Megabus, those could be unreliable at times.
Yeah. I feel like over there in Europe, driving is an afterthought, whereas over here it's a necessity.
Right. And yeah, that's something I was going to say, but I forgot it. But we'll get back to it.
So Europeans don't have to drive. They want to drive. And because they want to drive, they put more effort into it. On top of that, getting a driver's license in most European countries is a much more involved and expensive process. For example, in the Netherlands, getting a driver's license can cost a couple €1,000 because you have to do mandatory driving lessons.
Oh my God.
On top of that, the age to get a driver's license is much older than most states in the US. So I believe in the Netherlands you can start learning to drive around 16 and a half years old. That's when you do your theory test and then you start doing driving lessons. You don't have a full driver's license without restrictions until you're 18 years old. Compared to Florida, where I'm from, you start driving at 15, you do your theory test and you start driving at 15, and you only have to have a learner's permit for 1 year, and there's no mandatory driving lessons. Your parents can teach you how to drive. On top of that, the cost in general for driving is much lower. Cost of getting a driver's license is much lower in the US. And driving is kind of a necessity in a lot of parts of the United States, except for major metropolitan cities. You have to drive. So getting a driver's license is less of a privilege in the US and more of a necessity.
Yeah, literally echoing our sentiments right there. And that's like, Florida is a bit more lax when it comes to laws like that.
Yeah.
So like, I remember I had to be 15 and a half to get my permit in Virginia when I got mine. So
and I think it's the same in Maryland too.
Okay, yeah. So
I think so. That's more than 20 years ago.
Right, so. But at the same time, echoing the sentiment, it's a lot less less barriers of entry. But like, knowing that it's like €2,500 to get a driver's license, that blows my mind.
Yeah. So that's crazy. I wonder if that's something they have to re-up every now and then. Like, you know, if they have to retake the whole test again, you know, because then that's different. That's different. But it makes sense. You pay for something and you give a shit about it because it's your choice.
Right. Exactly.
So that distinction alone, I think, contributes to a lot of the differences that I'm going to point out. So getting a driver's license is a much more involved process, especially in countries like the Netherlands. In Germany, it also requires mandatory lessons. It costs a lot of money. So when they invest that much into getting a driver's license, they don't want to lose it. They learn to drive properly. They learn the right rules of the road. They don't want to do anything to jeopardize that, and they drive accordingly.
That might also be why, because at the time of this video, I'm 2 or 3 weeks away from going on a trip to the United Kingdom, and I've learned that the cabs are a lot more expensive in the cities and just in general than, you know, like taking the tube or the bus. So maybe that's why, because there's so many loopholes you got to hop through in order to get a driver's license in the first place.
That would make sense. I think that would make sense. I mean, if the price of a service goes up, then the price of using that service would go up.
Right. It makes sense. Yeah.
You can see here in this example, I'm just outside of Amsterdam. There's nobody cruising in the left lane. I'm driving at 5:30 in the afternoon right now. Nobody is cruising in the left lane. The left lane is only for passing. You can see how people use the lanes. They're very well disciplined. And that's a common theme. They're well-disciplined drivers. This goes back to how they learn to drive. They have to take mandatory lessons. Their parents aren't teaching them to drive. Their parents aren't passing on bad habits about driving. They're learning the proper rules of the road. They're executing them while they learn to drive. So even though you take a theory test in the US on what the rules of the road are, you don't really remember that. You remember what you learned while you were learning to drive. And oftentimes that's from what your parents taught you. And that's not the case in Europe.
Yeah, that's something that just bothers the hell out of me driving on the highway is people in the fast lane that are not going fast. Like that's a safety issue.
Yep.
Yeah. And it just bothers
Exactly.
the hell out of me.
Exactly. I like that one lane is open because that's at least that gives you an oh shit lane.
Yeah.
You know, like if something happens in the middle lanes, you can escape to the outer lane.
Yeah, just go like that.
And know that there's no one there.
Yeah, and that's not the case in the United States. There are people that are Karens that try to be high and mighty and like the speed limit is this, only do this, but I've seen them get pulled over by the police for not respecting the fast lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see here the highway just widened up and people immediately start moving to the right. Not everybody, but most people do. Nobody's fighting, nobody's rushing. They're just following the rules. They're well disciplined. Don't get me wrong, not everybody follows every rule. You can see there are some more aggressive drivers sometimes, but it's not the norm. And even the more aggressive ones tend to get on their way, get out of the way. They're not messing with anybody. They're not pissing anybody off. There's no real road rage.
Well, because they can get out of the way.
So discipline is one of those key.
Right, you're able to get out of the way.
Yeah. There's no traffic blocking the road ragers. If they have an issue, they'll keep going.
Yeah.
Period. Over here, that's where we have the issue. Is because there's just traffic all over the place, and each lane has its own made-up speed. It's whoever the slowest person is in that lane makes that speed limit for that lane.
Right.
Anybody off, there's no real road rage. So discipline is one of those key important attributes. The next thing is the roads in general. The roads are well maintained. I'm going off of what I've seen in the Netherlands and Germany. Not every European country has the same privilege. I've seen some pretty poor roads in countries like Belgium. And even I've heard in Italy, roads aren't as nice. But you can see here the highway is well maintained. There are no potholes. It's quite wide. And people use the lanes correctly. So even though there's a lot of lanes, it allows for a lot of capacity because people actually follow the rules of the road. They stay to the right. They only pass on the left. They pass and then they get back over. And that's the general way it works here. So when they add more lanes, when the highway is wider, it allows for much more free-flowing traffic, a lot more capacity, a lot more cars. Unlike places like Houston where they added lanes, nobody follows proper rules there. So they continue to sit in the left lane, even if it's 16 lanes wide, and it doesn't help the traffic situation at all. In this area, this is a speed-controlled area, so it's actually controlled by average speed cameras. I'll deep dive into that in a separate video, but the Netherlands has some of the strictest speed laws in Europe. Talking about the rules of the road, when you look at truckers, they also follow the rules very strictly in Europe. They're almost always all the way to the right. They rarely are passing. There are zones where they're not allowed to pass. They're rarely in the left lane. They're rarely passing. When they do pass, they get back over to the right lane immediately. There's less clogging of traffic. So discipline.
Yeah. When it comes to truckers, I remember me and my ex went down to Florida one time from Maryland, and we went to Jacksonville. We were passing through, like it was early in the morning, and I think there was road rage between two big trucks, and they were just like, there were some very tight turns, and they were just kind of speeding through, and it could have gotten real
Man,
bad there.
that's hear me out though. Like there is a you have to understand where he's driving probably isn't as densely populated as Orlando or Houston or a place like New York or LA. This is on par with rural driving. And if you weed out, if you make something so expensive where it's a privilege, not a lot of people are going to be there, where that means you have money to pour into the infrastructure of the road systems and take care of the roads, and not everyone can afford to drive.
Right.
So there's less people in anyway.
Yeah. Heck, it might be densely populated, and because there's so many barriers to entry to driving, there is not as many people on the road, and it gives room for truckers,
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine if we did that here? If a driver's license was like $2,500 or $3,700?
Yeah.
Could you imagine the roads in that point?
Yeah.
There would be no one. We would have to rely on public transportation.
Yeah. And good luck in some of these rural areas like where we live.
Yeah.
Shit.
Learning the rules of the road, following them, these are important themes. The process to get a driver's license is much more involved, much more strict. Another thing with driving in Europe, in my opinion, the cars are much more solid. They're much more roadworthy. You have vehicle inspections, so people can't drive old, beat-up cars. You have to have your vehicle inspected ever so often. Depending on the age of the vehicle, it's either once a year or once every few years. There's rules about what the vehicle can or can't have equipped on it. It has to pass inspection for you to keep driving it on the road. So the roadworthiness of vehicles is also better. And some states have this. Florida in particular doesn't have this. So you see people driving on the highway with rickety vehicles that are falling apart. They've gotten into an accident and they haven't fixed the vehicle. It's a road hazard, in my opinion. That doesn't happen here. People maintain their cars well in the first place. They have to maintain them well because to keep driving them on the road, they have to pass the inspections. Germany has some of the strictest inspection laws. You can see many videos on YouTube about passing the TÜV inspection. I haven't had to go through this personally in the Netherlands, but I do know that inspections are required. I haven't seen any poorly maintained vehicles on the road. And because of this, because of the discipline, because of the roadworthiness of the vehicles, generally Europe has higher speed limits. The Netherlands used to have a national speed limit on the highway of 130 kilometers an hour, which equates to 81 miles per hour. People used to drive faster than that. Recently, as of March of 2020, there's a national speed limit of 100 kilometers an hour until 7 p.m. Some roads are still 100 kilometers per hour in general. I'll do a separate deep dive into that in another video about the Netherlands. But in general, countries like Germany or France, the highest speed limit you'll see on suburban highways is 130 kilometers an hour. And people drive faster than that. You can easily drive 140 kilometers an hour without any issue. And again, if everybody follows these rules of the road, driving that fast, even on narrow highways, isn't an issue.
Yeah, like that's maintaining the cars. Like that's a big thing. Like it's very lax in this country of like what is required in order to pass an inspection.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, if regulations were put into place on like you cannot have tags on your car if it doesn't pass, like many people would say that's infringing on their freedom. They're infringing on their liberty to drive any kind of car they want, which is really not, at the end of the day, like thinking about the greater good's not a bad thing at all.
Mm-mm.
When it comes to not having a road hazard on the highway. You know?
I mean, yeah. But I feel like I understand it when everyone has the money to put in, or the people that can put in the money to. It's a privilege, not a right. Driving is a privilege, not a right. Over here, it's viewed as a right, not a privilege. So that's a different ethos completely, and we took that and ran with it. That's why car culture is massive here.
Right.
So,
right.
It's interesting to see this though, because what he's saying makes sense. It's kind of like, okay, you pour money into this thing, it's going to run right, because people are going to care about their cars. because they want to drive, because they spend a lot of money to drive. So they're going to give a shit about everything else that comes with that.
Yeah.
You know, whereas here we haphazardly drive shit with check engine lights on, just
Yeah.
because that's freedom and it's expensive.
Right.
You know, that's just how it is.
Yeah, it's just how our country is.
Yep.
It's not really going to change much in the next 50 years.
No, I doubt it.
Yeah.
You can also see in the Autobahn, people driving much faster than that. It's a 2-lane highway, yet there's very little accidents. And that goes back to the discipline of following the rules of the road. People keep to the right. Even if somebody is driving faster than you, it's completely safe. I'll have to do another video about the Autobahn because that's a whole experience in and of itself. As an American, I truly love and appreciate the Autobahn, and I wish that America had that privilege, but honestly, the drivers don't deserve it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's like the discipline that comes in, you know, driving on like places like the Autobahn and just other European roads, highways in the first place. That discipline helps a lot in not causing accidents, and it's helping me understand the love of Formula One versus the love of NASCAR in Europe and America consider, because F1, like, it's very calculated. There's a lot of strategy involved, and the European mind appreciates that a lot more. Whereas, you know, because Americans drive very haphazardly, you know, race, hail, praise, Dale, NASCAR, beating and banging, that's what sells in this country.
Yeah.
So watching this kind of video is kind of helping me understand that difference there.
And understand this too. I know this is going to sound absolutely absurd to anyone who listens to this, but we're busy multitasking when we're driving. We shouldn't be, but we are.
Yeah. Right.
You're either eating on the go, unfortunately texting or calling, even whether it's hands-free, whatever it is, you're busy you're working while getting to work.
Right. We're overworked and underpaid. So that's
so
why we're all distracted.
That's the thing of it all. It's like, yeah, how many times have I had to slam the brake on while I've been texting in my youth? Probably a lot.
Yeah.
Probably more than I would want to admit. But it's just the way it is. We're just distracted drivers, which leads to accidents, which leads to just go on and on and on with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm sure he'll touch on that in this one. I bet he will.
Yeah.
Another reason driving in Europe is so much better, again, going back to the discipline, you'll see this as a common theme. There's very little distracted driving. People are focused on driving while they're driving. They're not on their phones. They're not eating. They're not really drinking coffee. They're not reading a book. They're not doing all of these crazy things you see people in America do while they drive. They're focused on driving. And they have to be focused on driving. You're not allowed to be using your phone. You're not allowed to be eating while you're driving. You're not allowed to be doing anything but driving while you're driving. In fact, in the Netherlands, they started rolling out a system where there are cameras over the highways that will look at cars and take pictures. If you're caught driving while you're on your phone or doing something while you're distracted while you're driving, they'll actually mail you a ticket. So they're very strict about enforcing no distracted driving, and people follow it. People focus on driving. And when you focus on driving and you have drivers that are focused on driving, you can have much more freedom and much more driving enjoyment. So distracted driving.
Yeah, like literally called it out right there. That's crazy that they have, you know, like closed circuit cameras to actually pick up on that stuff, because I have never received a ticket for distracted driving. And I'll admit, I've done it multiple times. If I said I didn't do it, I would be lying to you.
Yeah.
And so if that was implemented here, one, that the distracted driving would go down, but two, at the same time, they would see it as an infringement on our liberties.
And the state would make a lot of money.
They would. We could probably pay down the national deficit. That.
Or at least the state deficit.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Driving isn't really a thing here, and it's really well enforced. I think that helps contribute to some of the driving characteristics of some of the roads. People are much more focused So there aren't really distractions while you're driving. You're focused on driving, you're paying attention, and this is part of the reason why there are some things you really need to pay attention to while you're driving in Europe. Things like roundabouts, things like speed humps, things like pedestrian zones, bicycle lanes, trams, buses, horses that are allowed to be in traffic, a lot of different things that you need to pay attention to, and that's why you really need to pay attention while you're driving. And Europeans do in general. Now, as an American,
yeah, we have roundabouts here in America, like more in like the more metropolitan areas. They're starting to become a thing in more rural areas, but not as much. Like, but we have that, and bicycle lanes and things like that. We're starting to incorporate that into our society as we try and make efforts to try and do better, but it doesn't always work out.
No. It's I feel like driving the US is more like a Grand Theft Auto thing.
Yeah.
Which is fun. It keeps you on the edge, right? But if you want calm, enjoying it, relaxing driving, not really testing your metal per se. Yeah. Okay, I can see it. It could be relaxing.
Yeah.
Driving in Europe, I am guilty of carrying over some of my bad habits about distracted driving. But when I need to pay attention, I pay attention. And I've always thought of that in the US as well. I pay attention while I'm driving. I focus on driving. I get pleasure out of that. And that's the norm here in Europe. You drive when you're driving. You're not doing anything else. It's not a time when you're, catching up on emails or reading a book or eating your lunch. You can see here, this is one of these roads that's almost one car width wide. It shares a bicycle lane, and this is a bi-directional road. You really have to pay attention here. You have to mind the space. If a car's coming in the other direction, you have to squeeze to the right and make sure there's enough space. But when the road is empty like this, you can enjoy it. One day.
Yeah, you don't see this in the States unless it's like a back country road and it's one lane and you really got to be paying attention.
Yeah, that's like probably one of my trucks wide. That road right there.
Right. Yeah.
Difference with Europe, generally people don't use cars to commute. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people that do commute to work by car in Europe and European cities, but in general, cost of parking is very expensive. Fuel is very expensive. People don't use a car to commute if they don't have to. So people will often defer to public transportation to get to work. So people aren't driving regularly as much as they do in the US. So usually when they're...
So that's another thing too. Like if I lived in a European country, I wouldn't own a car. I just wouldn't do it. It seems like it would eat up more of my expenses than and it is necessary,
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I'm looking at, because I'm looking at trying to go to go-kart tracks in the UK when I go over, and like the outdoor ones, booking tickets for them is like twice the price of booking an outdoor karting thing in the States.
Wow.
So that probably is why. I mean, the electric indoor ones are pretty comparable, but the outdoor ones are definitely a lot more expensive.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Driving, it's for pleasure, not so much necessity. Of course, it's maybe necessity to go somewhere, but they're focused on driving while they're doing it. It's not part of their morning commute. And this is generally speaking, this is my take. It's not scientific, of course. I like that I can choose to drive when I want to drive. I can enjoy driving. I'm lucky that I live in Amsterdam. I don't have to commute. I don't have to commute by car. Another thing I've noticed is when people are towing something or carrying cargo, it's well secured, it's covered with a net, things don't fly out of trucks, things don't fly out of trailers. People, when they're towing something or when they're carrying something or hauling something, they're staying to the right, they're driving in the slower lane, they're not passing anybody, they're not driving erratically. I remember regularly seeing in Florida landscaping trucks with trailers with things that are just bouncing around, flying around, things that could fly off of the trailer in any second, and those guys are driving 80-something miles an hour in the passing lane, passing cars, driving erratically. That just doesn't happen here. You consider some of the points that I've mentioned.
Yeah, I've seen that happen before. 100%.
But that's how they level. That's how they level up, man.
Yeah.
That's how they get to the other job, and they don't need to unstrap nothing because it's all loose.
Right.
Saves time.
Right. Save time is money.
Work,
Yeah.
guys. Work.
Yeah.
Work. That's what we think about when we're driving. Is work.
Yeah. 100%.
Not driving.
Driving in Europe.
Yeah.
Is overall safer. If people follow the rules, it makes for a safer experience for cars, for pedestrians, for cyclists. It also makes for a better driving experience as a driver. And that's why I love driving in Europe. After a long road trip, I don't feel exhausted. I don't feel like I was dealing with a lot of bad drivers. I don't feel like I was dealing with a lot of people sitting in the left lane. I don't feel that fatigue that you feel when you drive in America. I actually feel quite relaxed while I drive. And it's because there's similar people like me driving, people who want to drive, people who enjoy driving, people who pay attention while they're driving. So I feel like I'm sharing the road with a lot of like-minded individuals. I also feel like driving in Europe, I've become a better driver. I've learned things that I didn't learn in America. Roundabouts, for example, dealing with cyclists regularly. Like I said, this is my personal experience. It's definitely not fact. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching.
There you go, man. There you go.
Well,
there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, you bring up points, and I get it. I understand it. Like I said, if we could unbuild something and relearn something, there's better ways to do it. There's better ways to get there, but
unfortunately, old habits die hard.
And they're not going to die. There's a lot of people that make money off of crashes. There's a lot of people that make money off of state inspections. There's a lot of people that make money off of saving money by not fixing their vehicles. Granted, that's a back-asswards way of thinking about it.
There's a lot of money in insurance and not paying out people for the thing.
And that's it's an industry. Automotive industry. It all goes hand in hand with each other.
And every single American like fast food and store brand was built off highways, is being a roadside convenience to pull off, go get some food, and then continue on your journey without even getting out of your car.
Exactly. So in theory, what he's saying is correct, and I agree. In practice, there's no possible way that we do this. In theory, everyone that's driving has a license, pays for insurance, and or part of a company that is reputable, that upkeeps their fleet vehicles. In a perfect world,
right? That's
not how it is,
and it'll be that way for quite a long time. I don't see it changing, at least in the next 50 or so years.
No, I don't think so.
If that.
I highly doubt that. As long as there are people here, and shit's always gonna be fucked up
in terms of driving, and it's how it is.
It's nice to see. It's nice and constant to see what it could have been.
Right.
It's nice to see what it could be.
Well, if we could all come together on a general consensus of, hey, we need to improve how things are when it comes to driving in the roads and all that.
Yep. But it is what it is. It's nice to see it implemented. At least we have driving licenses of that.
They're easy to get, but at least we have them.
At least we have them. Shit.
Anyway, y'all let us know what you think down below. If there's other types of this type of video of driving in Europe or driving in other parts of the world, let us know down below. We'd love to check them out to see what it's about.
Definitely. That's a unique way to see, because I'll tell you one thing. Traveling to South America a lot as a kid and different Central American countries, man, I was so relaxed when we flew over the States, coming back home and seeing the straight lines and traffic, and it always made me feel good. Like, I'm finally here out of this madness. There's order. Because you go to South America, bro, if he's had an issue with Orlando traffic, you go south of Mexico, holy shit, that's Super Mario Kart. That's it. That's Mario Kart right there. That's good luck. Yeah. You don't stop at signs, you beat, and that's it. Like, that's how you go. And so it's it, because I mean, check out driving from around the world in general, because that's a great way to see some shit. Because that's, and the thing is, in those other countries, I was always in a taxi, right? I was always I've never in South America.
Okay. My next question is, how did you get around?
Oh, freaking, my ass was in my throat, dude. I was like, we're going to die. at some point in this
Yeah.
car ride. You know, but their own chaos, which is weird. It's all chaotic, but it's all chaotic the same way, and it functions somehow.
And that's just how it is down there.
And that's where it pays not to be a good driver. Like,
Yeah.
not to be a proper driver, because you have to mold with the chaos.
To be an offensive driver.
Yeah, you'd be. Because it's like, they all do it wrong, but they all do it wrong the same way, so it works.
Yeah. Makes sense. So that's good to know for me when I do go to South America, you know?
Yeah, bro.
Just buy a bumper car. And maybe carry some banana peels.
Yeah, just get a red shell or the blue shell, and then just chuck those out the window. So this is madness out there. But
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, if I were to put it, that's a good middle ground. You have your European countries that are, it's a drive. US is a good middle ground, and then you go to South America, which is, it's like freaking no holds barred, Mad Max, fucking guys on hoods with guitars, shit.
Run the fuck out of a muck down there.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, man, I like this.
I like coming, y'all.
Yep.
Also consider subscribing and watching another video. Thank you, channel members. What now, Dan?
Unplug and go driving, guys.
Exactly. And we'll see y'all next time.